Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to continue on exploring more works for the theme of spectacular endings, this time looking at some classical works by Shostakovich. This one we're looking at specifically is the fourth movement of the 11th Symphony. The title of it is Storm Chimes. Looks to be about 15 minutes long, though given it's also the final movement of the show, it's possible that the end of the video has some ovation to it, so it might be a little shorter than that. Regardless, I'm ready to get into this. Always love when we get some classical music on the channel. Let's dive in. There's just a lot of intensity here right off the start. I'm really curious what those cornets are. They're played on the side with flat... they're not valves, are they? They're buttons. It reminds me of a French horn, but with the circular framing of like a trumpet. You know what's interesting is it's so busy, and yet there's a lot of singularity and focus. I love those little delayed moments. Cut out the low end and then bring everything in big. Those whirlwind flurries between the flutes and violas. I'm still thinking about that. I know it was like last section. Trying to find the pattern between when he chooses the slides and the staccato movement. See, those are French horns, and they have the little flat buttons on them. I love timpanis. They sound so good. That was the drum, boom, that was in the back there. A little bit of a cheeky rhythmic play there. Everything else is so militaristic, heavy-handed, and the trumpets just had this fun little counter rhythm. I think it's wild that a majority of this track has been building intensity, and yet it feels like it's constantly going up. Like there's no ceiling to this. Yeah, a lot of half-step movement in here, implying a lot of tension, but leaning towards the beauty of whatever the aftermath of that was. And an uplift. I didn't know better. That was some solid circulatory breathing, but keeping the physical notions of it hidden. I'm curious what kind of clarinet that is. I know we saw an alto clarinet earlier, but the range on that's just a hair bit higher. I've never seen the mouthpiece curve into the performer. Speaking of more clarinets, this is a very cool section though. So that's interesting. I wonder if they're staggering their parts. Is that normal? I'll try to remember to bring that up later. Wow. Just a quick reminder. That was only the last 15 minutes of an hour-long symphony. I always put the link to the video that I'm using in the description if you'd like to listen to the 3 movements that come before that. You can find the link to do so. It's the whole performance. I just started at 48 minutes into it or something like that. Wow. I was talking about staggering parts. This doesn't really have anything to do with the performance or the music, but just the placement of the performers. When if you've never played music in a symphony like this before, you might not know this. So I'm going to kind of get into some 101 level stuff. When you see 5, 6, 7 people playing the same instrument here, some of them are usually playing the same parts. There isn't just, well, let me put it this way. Some of them are playing the same part. Some of them aren't. There isn't just the French horn part or the trombone part or whatever. There's trombone 1, trombone 2, sometimes even trombone 3 and 4, different parts for a section. And every time that I've played, which I've played with 3 different groups, it's always been that all the first parts are together, the second parts, the third parts, and the fourth parts. But here it looked like they were alternating. Every other French hornist was playing a different part. And I wonder how common that is. I've never seen it, but I've never played in a professional symphony either, so. And of all the performances I've watched, I've never seen it either, but maybe I just missed it. But it was very clear there. Every other French horn was playing a different part. And so that's pretty cool. It kind of divvies the sound out a little bit more, which I guess, I mean, it would be up to the composer slash conductor what they want out of it, how they want the sound to get mixed and intermingled within the projection of the orchestra out into the audience. Because it 100% would affect it. Probably not massively, but enough for the conductor to know, and they would want a specific sound out of it. But yeah, I've never seen anything like that. That was kind of bonkers. So yeah, this song is powerful, and the person who suggested it said it's the last movement of a symphony about the failed Russian Revolution of 1905 with a spectacular ending. I would normally suggest listening to the whole thing, but I think the last movement works on its own, and I completely agree with that second thought. It probably is a phenomenal ending to the entire hour-long symphony, but in isolation, I think it's a fine track as well. It does work well on its own. However, that topic, I think that's something I'm going to come back to. As of right now, I don't have any thoughts about it, but I'm also listening to the last quarter of a story and saying, I don't really understand how this ties to the themes. Like, no, I'm missing a lot of the story being told. So, but I have some thoughts on it, as fragmented as they might be. We'll get to them later, though. But I do think this works on its own. It tells a very concise story within its 15 minutes. And that is a story of drive. That's really what I get out of this. I want to come back to that, though. Keep that in mind. Concept of drive, of momentum, of just seeing a goal and wanting to achieve it. A lot of this song is aggressive. There is a lot of staccato notes. Staccato notes are ones that are very short. Bop, bop, bop. When we have a lot of instruments coming together, playing a single staccato note rhythmically, but having different notes that they might pick, we often call these stingers. And there is just songs just full of that. It's a very aggressive, sharp song full of sharp, short notes. A lot of the tones that come out of this are big, powerful. The layers are massive. Everything is absolutely felt. When it comes to the brass, there's a lot of blasting going on. Blasting is a less technical term. I don't know if there is a proper term for this, but there is definitely a threshold, volume-wise, for brass instruments before the sound begins to get overblown and breaks apart in ways that just sound kind of gnarly. It's useful in some music, and here, yeah, to very, very positive effects. We hear specifically, I hear it from the tubas and trombones, just these really big, bulbous sounds coming out of the low end brass. It is massive, it is ominous, it is big. To me, it feels like a titan plodding around. It is just massive in scale. That is a lot of what this song is. The strings doing these short staccato notes, low end stuff, your cellos, your lower end woodwinds, your lower end brass, the timpanis, just kind of filling out this low end space with power, with width, with body. They might all come together for a short staccato note, but the higher tones, your piccolos, your flutes, violins, the tone sort of dissipates quickly, but the low end reverb of just the note echoing off the walls, it permeates. It continues to exist long after the higher pitched instruments, their sound is dissipated, and it's a palpable sound. It is something that on paper seems simple, but in execution, especially based on the acoustics of the room you're performing in, it can be a massive, massive thing. And I think they did a fantastic job showing that off. When instruments weren't doing, staccato tones themselves, just short notes, it was a flurry of short notes. We heard a lot of this out of the trumpets and the French horns. I still got to look up that trumpet because it's perplexing to me. But yeah, little flurries of notes, 3 to 6 notes, just these little ornamental ideas. Less slurry though, more sharp, more direct. It's definitely a feeling of power, of not necessarily royalty, but strength, if that makes sense, as an opposition to power, parallel to it. Again, drive, a need to get something done. This takes up like 8 minutes of the beginning of the track and a vast majority of the end of the track as well. And he leans into it for a very long time, finding new and inventive ways to explore it, finding new instruments who can take, apply a new context to it, a new perspective on it. And then it just ends. There's some silence and then melancholy. Extreme melancholy. Mixed with beauty. This was the part I was talking about where I mentioned that the few instruments playing were working primarily in half steps. Half step is the smallest distance between two notes that we have in the 12-tone scale. The piano, the basic notes that we use in most Western music. There's other ways to tune instruments and stuff like that, but in the basic way, we have 12 notes, and a half step is the distance between two keys on a keyboard, whether that's a white key to a black, or in the case of B to C or E to F, two white notes next to each other. Half tones. That doesn't sound. Why would I say half tones? It's not half notes. That's a length. Half steps. There we go. I think half tones works too, but it's just not what people normally call them. Half steps introduce a lot of tension because it's two notes really close to each other. There's no distance to be gained. A lot of our emotional resonance is based upon the distance between notes. It's called a note interval. Chords are created out of note intervals. Most chords don't deal with half steps. Keys do, but chords don't. Chords tend to have more space. And so when we don't have that space, when we have a bunch of notes that are stacked right on next to each other, it's tense. And it's not just this event. If you play a piano and you just grab the 5 notes together, C, C sharp, D, D sharp, and E, you just grab that bunch and you play it, it is dissonant. And our brains are pretty good at connecting the harmonic elements of notes played next to each other. Earlier this week, no, was it last week? It might have been last week. I talked about chord shapes. How, like on a guitar, instead of just strumming out the entire chord all at once, you create the chord shape with your hands, and then you play the strings one after another. So if you were to do an arpeggiation, you'd have bom, 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 bom. They're all individually played, and the ringing out of the strings will create a chord somewhat, but our brains are really good at hearing that and saying, oh, that's a chord, that's a major chord. And so when we hear all those half notes back to back, our brains are putting that together and saying, oh, dang, that is tense. That's a lot of tones that don't want to be played at the same time, even though they're not played at the same time. And so we have all this tension baked into this section because of all of these half steps. The movement is very minimal too, which is a drastic change of pace from the wide sweeping jumps that we had in the earlier section. All of the energy, all of the wind that we had behind us has been removed. Like a gut punch, we're on the ground on our knees crawling now. We can't take very big steps. The distance we cover is small now. That's what that section feels like to me. There is a beauty to it though, and I'm not sure how to read that yet. It might make more sense within the larger structure, but here the story I get of just this movement is one of determination that gets shut down. And then for some reason beauty arises out of that. Maybe it makes sense if I knew more about the Russian Revolution of 1905, but the fact that it's a failed revolution doesn't make me think that there is something beautiful to come out of that. Before we move on to what I have to say about the final section of this song, this movement, the last like 5 minutes of the track, I want to bring up contrast, primarily volume. There's a lot of contrast in this track. We have a lot of different timbres, all sorts of different instruments and sounds. There's a whole percussion section, which is pretty typical in classical music, but atypical for what we usually cover on the channel. There's bells, there's glockenspiels, there's timpani, which we heard a whole lot of. I saw a orchestral bass drum. We had the snare in there. I don't remember hearing the bass drum though. That's why I bring it up. I say I saw it in one of the wide pan shots, but I don't remember hearing it in here. There's just a lot of stuff. In those wide pan shots, it's in the top left corner, sitting behind the trumpets, I think. That's where it would normally be. The trumpets would be on the stage right in the back. And then usually the percussion would be behind that. But I don't remember seeing the trumpets there, so that's why I say it's probably behind the trumpets. Whole auxiliary percussion thing over here. All sorts of sounds coming out of that. We have woodwinds and brass on top of that. The brass, we have quite a few of them. We have the trumpets, we have the trombones, the French horns, we have the tubas, and then we have a wide array of woodwind instruments. We have what I think was piccolos. I heard flutes, but I don't remember seeing any in the video. We had 3 different kinds of clarinets across a wide range of ranges. um, and there's something else, wasn't there? Oh yeah, we had oboes too. So quite a few instruments to give us a ton of different colorings of tone. A lot of diversity there. So we have timbral. I don't know if that's a word. We have diversity in our timbre. We also have diversity in weight, in atmosphere. We have the big booming drive sections. We have the quiet introspective section. Massive change between those two, and then the build up back to the end. So we have contrast there as well. But what I want to focus on primarily is dynamic volume. This is all over the place. Honestly, I thought the beginning of the track opened up pretty loud. We started off with some crazy stingers and then backed it down just a little bit, not much. Then we backed it down a lot. And I remember seeing well, it's over here for me, but you don't get to see that. It's part of my software. But over there in the corner, you would have seen the volume, the 2 bars bouncing up and down. It was only like a minute in, and we started to bring the volume down quite a bit. But again, not for long. What I'm getting at is that this opening section, despite me remembering it being loud and militaristic, also had a lot of fluctuation to it. It wasn't just loud all the time. But when it was at its peak, I really thought that was the loudest it was going to get. It was pretty loud, right? Then we got quiet. We had the whole middle section, the melancholic part. It rises up into the ending. And boy, does this part get loud. I can't imagine being there. I don't think that the audio from this video has anywhere near the feeling of being in this sound. I could hear the power of the bells. I could hear the volume and all the brass, the flurry of, oh, I completely forgot to mention the strings. There's violins, violas, cellos in here. And the fast moving ideas of the woodwinds, the higher pitched notes, and our piccolos. It feels like it should be overwhelming, but it wasn't. And I really feel like it's one of those things you have to be there for to feel this. But what I really loved was at the beginning of the track, I was like, man, this is pretty loud already. I look at the volume visualizer and we're like 70%. And I'm just like, I don't know where they're going to take this, but they have room to grow. And they do at the end. It's just a monumental wall of sound. It is wild to me to think that they can create this without amplifiers, without electricity. And like it shouldn't be. I've been a part of orchestras that have played music like this. Not necessarily this itself, but just high dynamic range, where our loudest parts were so far, just volume wise, way up there compared to the quiet sections at the bottom. And it still blows my mind though. Whenever I hear something like this, I'm just reminded this was all done with air and physics. We vibrated strings with hair or whatever. I assume bows are still made with horsehair, maybe. Maybe they have new bows that are more animal friendly. I don't know. I have not kept up with violin technology. But we're vibrating strings, we're blowing air through metal, and we're just hitting metal and drum heads and stuff with sticks. And it can be this monumental force of nature, something that rattles your bones and shakes you to the core. And so to me, The end of this song is so much more than just what's written on paper, so much more than even just what gets played. The emotion is 100% there, but it gets amplified by the fact that there's no amplification. It makes me feel it more because it feels like magic. And I know science of sound waves and how they work multiplicatively and all that stuff. Yeah, I know it's not magic, but it still feels like it to me. It's one of those things that despite knowing how it works, it still doesn't make any sense. That's orchestras for me. I had mentioned that the ending is an interesting vibe because it revisits some of the earlier feelings of the song, the marching of it, the power, the drive and motivation. But it does so after a defeat. I've been thinking about this. I do think I need to read up a little bit on the Russian Revolution before I say that this is what it's about. This is just a hypothesis right now. But it could be an unending fire for those in the revolution that despite they were defeated today, that the will to do better, to move on, or to fight for whatever they were fighting for is not extinguished. But I am curious if anybody else has any ideas about that, specifically if you know about the 1905 Russian Revolution and what came about that, what it was about. All these details probably helps in understanding the music quite a bit. But it's also called storm chimes. And those really big bells that we heard at the end that just resonated through the place. Chimes is a good word for them. I use bells as sort of a catch-all for a lot of pitched percussion. Glockenspiel, xylophone, vertical chimes, they all sort of fall under the bell category. Anything you can hit them makes a specific pitch, and you can lengthen or shorten the different elements to get different pitches out of them. They're all bells to me. I don't know how accurate that is within musical vocabulary, but it's always made sense to me. Um, they ring out, and as loud as the orchestra is, you can still very clearly hear these chimes. What is that supposed to represent? To me, that's part of the beauty of that middle section. It's solemn, it's melancholic, but there's an uplift. It's not even like halfway through the solemn section. It's like in bar 11 of it. We've barely been in it. We've felt this defeat, and there's already some silver lining. There's already a beauty to it. And so when we push into this section, we have this animosity, we have this aggression, this big sound, and then these chimes ring out, cut through it. To me, it's part of that positivity. I don't know what it's all supposed to mean. But I do know how I felt listening to it. And I'm curious if I did any research into this and understood the story of this revolution, if any of the feelings I felt while listening to the track would line up with the events of that. Those are my thoughts. Shostakovich's Symphony No. 11 in G minor, Opus number 103. Movement 4, Allegro non troppo, storm chimes. That's a lot. Let me know your thoughts on this track. Anything that stood out to you, anything you'd like to add on to what I said, correct me on any of that. Maybe you have your own perspectives or opinions on things. And if you want to help me deepen my understanding of the relationship between this track and the revolution, please drop that down in the comments as well. Oh, I forgot to talk about the trumpets. It's not too important, I don't think. I have some thoughts about how these trumpet style instruments are different from the traditional trumpet. And it mostly comes down to valves and moving parts and stuff like that, but it's not too important about the song itself. So I'll hold that off to another time, I suppose. I don't know. Alright, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree. Takes you here. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.